There's a kind of pain that doesn't leave marks on your body, but it crushes you from the inside. A pain that has no witnesses but follows you in silence. This pain has a name: living with a covert narcissist. And the cruelest part? No one sees it, no one understands it, and you can't even explain it. It sounds like an exaggeration, but it's not. It's real, and it's there, every single day, eating away at your self-esteem, messing with your head, making you doubt yourself. He doesn't yell. He doesn't hit. He doesn't slam doors. But he destroys. And for those who live it, it's emotional hell. He doesn't need to raise his voice to make you shrink. His weapon is calculated silence, coldness disguised as calm, indifference used as punishment. And you feel it. You feel it in your chest, you feel it in your skin, but you can't quite name it. Because everything seems so subtle. And that's where the danger lies. When there are no fights, no shouting, the outside world thinks everything's fine. But inside, you're falling apart. And no one notices. That's the cruel part. You slowly disappear in silence. And him? He stays untouched. Only those who live with a narcissist truly know what it feels like. You start walking on eggshells even when there's no reason to. You start thinking twice, 3 times, 10 times before saying anything. Because his silence weighs more than any scream. He makes you feel wrong without saying a word. He punishes you without lifting a finger. And you start believing the problem is you. That maybe you're too sensitive, too intense, too needy. But that's not it. You're just the target of a manipulation that leaves no visible scars. But it leaves deep ones in your soul. Your mind begins to collapse. You speak, he doesn't listen. You complain, he ignores. You cry, he turns away. And the worst part? He makes you feel guilty for all of it. He flips the whole thing like a master manipulator. Suddenly, you're the dramatic one, the difficult one, the ungrateful one. And slowly, you start apologizing just for feeling. Apologizing for needing attention, for wanting affection, for craving emotional connection. And that is emotional abuse wrapped in calm. He doesn't lose control. He controls you. And that's what hurts the most. Then you fall into a cycle. You try to understand. You try to adapt. You try to become the best version of yourself, hoping he'll go back to how he was at the beginning. But he doesn't. Because that beginning was a performance. A bait. He only shows empathy when he feels he might lose you. That's a brutal trigger. Intermittent reinforcement. He gives you just enough to keep you hooked, waiting for that good side of him to return. But deep down, you know it's not real. And even so, you keep hoping. You don't recognize yourself anymore. Your essence has been erased little by little. You stopped being spontaneous, free, light. Now you live in a constant state of alert, afraid to say anything that might bother him, push him away, or trigger him. And all that, for someone who doesn't move a finger to understand you. He's cold, calculated, subtle, but destructive. This is the kind of pain no one sees, but it devours the one who feels it. And you feel it, every single day. Even when you try to convince yourself it's all in your head. He isolates you emotionally, pulls you away from friends, family, and even from yourself. Makes you believe only he understands you. And when you start to question things, he breaks you down with soft words that cut like blades. He makes you doubt your own judgment. That's one of the most dangerous triggers. Emotional invalidation. You stop trusting your own feelings and start only trusting what he allows you to feel. That's prison, just invisible. And do you know what he fears the most? That you wake up, that you open your eyes, that you realize this was never love. It was control. Emotional domination disguised as a relationship. He fears losing control over your emotions, because that's what he wants deep down. Power. And he'll use anything, including silence, to keep it. He plays with you like you're a pawn in a game, but you're not. You're a person. You feel, you hurt, you bleed inside. And when you think of leaving, he changes, becomes sweet, caring, attentive. And you think, this is it. Now he gets it. Now he's trying. And for a moment you believe again. But it's just that. A moment. Because he doesn't want to change. He wants to keep the game going. To hold on to your hope just enough so you don't leave. That's the yacht idealization and discard cycle trigger. And he'll repeat it over and over, as long as you allow it. So ask yourself, how long will you keep accepting crumbs? How long will you wait for love to come from someone who never truly saw you? How long will you live this life of silent pain? Because the way out exists. But it starts the moment you decide to stop silencing your pain just to keep someone who never made an effort to keep you well. The problem was never that you felt too much. The problem was that he never felt anything at all. You're not exaggerating. You're not crazy. You're just hurt. And it's okay to admit that, because only by acknowledging the pain can you begin to heal from it. And no one, absolutely no one, deserves to live with a silence that hurts more than sound ever could. If you've ever been through something like this, drop a comment below. Share how you felt and how you broke free from the narcissist. Stick around until the end, because I'm going to reveal something that could change your life starting today. There's a kind of pain that you carry in silence, one that slowly eats away at who you are. And the worst part? No one sees it. No one validates it. Because to the world, everything looks normal. But inside, you're crumbling. That's what it's like dealing with a covert narcissist. It's the slow creeping erosion of your self-worth. It's not dramatic. It's not explosive. But it's brutal. It's the kind of emotional warfare that leaves no bruises, but leaves you broken. You start questioning everything, especially yourself. You used to be confident. You used to trust your gut. But now you second-guess every word you say, every feeling you have. That's what they do. They plant seeds of doubt so subtle, so calculated, that over time you don't even realize how deep they've taken root. You stop trusting your own voice. And the silence they give you? That silence becomes louder than any scream. It's the absence that hurts the most. The way they pull away when you need them most. The way they give you nothing and make you feel like asking for anything makes you needy or too much. That silence is not peace. It's punishment. And your mind, desperate to make sense of it, starts creating excuses for them. They're just tired. Maybe it's me. That's the manipulation working. That's emotional control masked as emotional distance. And just when you gather the strength to call it out, to say, I feel alone, they twist it. Suddenly, you're the one overreacting. You're the one making drama out of nothing. That's a trap. One of the most powerful mental triggers they use, gaslighting. Making you question your reality, making you doubt your pain. They don't need to scream to silence you. All they need is to convince you that your feelings are invalid. You begin to crave their approval more than your own peace. That's what they want. They want you so focused on winning their affection, on getting that rare moment of kindness back that you forget what real love feels like. And when they finally give you a crumb of attention, it feels like a feast. That's intermittent reinforcement. It keeps you hooked. It makes you chase the very person who's hurting you. You start living for the highs, the moments when they show you affection, when they seem human again. But those moments are calculated. They're not real. They're the reset button they push to keep you stuck. You hold on to those tiny glimpses of love like they're proof that they care. But if love only shows up when you're on the verge of walking away, is it really love? Or is it control dressed up as comfort? They don't apologize. Not really. And when they do, it's vague, insincere, or immediately followed by something that makes you feel guilty. You start thinking, maybe I was too harsh. That's a setup. That's emotional inversion. You end up comforting the person who should be comforting you. You carry the weight of both your pain and their excuses. And slowly, you forget that your needs matter too. They play the long game. They don't destroy you in one blow. They do it through hundreds of tiny cuts. ignoring you when you're vulnerable, laughing off your concerns, giving you that look that makes you shrink inside. And when you try to explain this to someone else, you sound crazy, because none of it is obvious. None of it is loud. That's why it's so dangerous. That's why it goes unnoticed. You're not living anymore. You're surviving. You're measuring your words, holding back your feelings, walking on eggshells in your own relationship. That's not love. That's emotional captivity. A relationship should be a place where you can breathe, not a place where you have to hold your breath and hope you don't make the wrong move. And yet, here you are, still hoping, still trying, still giving more than you get. They isolate you without ever saying, don't talk to them. Instead, they make you feel like no one else understands you, like they're the only one who truly gets you. And once you're emotionally dependent on their approval, they start to withhold it. That's manipulative control. And it's deliberate, because as long as you need them to feel whole, they'll always have the upper hand. And even now, after all of this, there's a voice in your head asking, but what if I'm wrong? That voice isn't yours. It's the voice they planted, and it's time to cut it out. Because if you've read this far and you feel seen, if your chest is tight and your eyes sting, it's not a coincidence. It's recognition. It's your soul screaming for truth, for freedom, for healing. This is not in your head. It's happening, and it's real. You didn't imagine it. You're not crazy. You're not too much. You're a human being with a heart that's been stretched, manipulated, and bruised by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And if you feel like you're drowning in the quiet chaos of a narcissist's world, you're not alone. But you don't have to stay in it. You deserve more than silence. You deserve to feel heard, seen, valued, not only when it's convenient for someone else. You start thinking love is supposed to hurt, that maybe real connection always comes with confusion and pain. But that's not love. That's conditioning. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, through every little moment where your feelings were dismissed, your words twisted, your silence exploited. That's what they do. They train you to settle, to shrink, to accept less than you deserve. Because the smaller you feel, the bigger their control becomes. You stop reaching out to people, not because you don't want to, but because you don't know how to explain what's happening without sounding lost. You hesitate before opening up, scared someone will tell you it's your fault, or worse, won't believe you at all. That fear, that shame, that's how they win. They isolate you emotionally until the only voice you trust is theirs. And that voice? It's not nurturing, it's manipulative. It feeds your doubts, not your healing. You begin to live in two worlds. The one where you smile, keep going, pretend things are okay, and the one behind closed doors, where your soul feels like it's slowly disappearing. That disconnect is exhausting. It drains your energy, your joy, your passion for life, and even when something good happens, you can't fully feel it. Because you're always wondering, will they ruin it? Will they twist this into another thing I did wrong? And they will. They always do. They can turn your joy into guilt in seconds. If you laugh too loud, they'll go quiet. If you celebrate something, they'll withdraw. It's punishment without explanation. And you start associating happiness with consequences. That's emotional sabotage. And it becomes a reflex. You pull back from anything that might trigger them, even if it means hiding your wins, even if it means dimming your light. You learn to scan the room as soon as you walk in. Is he in a good mood? Is he cold today? Will he talk or just stare at his phone while I'm trying to connect? That constant hyper-awareness? It's not love. It's survival mode. Your nervous system is always alert, bracing for rejection or indifference. And that tension lives in your body. It steals your sleep, your peace, your sense of safety. And worst of all, you start thinking that's normal. Sometimes you get flashbacks of who you were before all this. Someone lighter. Someone who laughed without checking if it was too loud. Someone who didn't need to explain every feeling like it was a courtroom. That person still exists, but they're buried under layers of emotional exhaustion. That's what this kind of relationship does. It doesn't explode, it erodes. It strips you piece by piece until you forget who you used to be. And in public, he's perfect, calm, charismatic, the kind of person others admire. And every time someone compliments him, it stings a little. Because they don't see what you see, they don't feel what you feel. And when you try to speak out, it feels like no one will believe you. That's a social invalidation. And it makes the trap tighter. Because now, it's not just about convincing yourself you're not crazy, it's about convincing others too. He has this way of making every conversation about him, even when you're hurting, even when you're barely holding on. You could be crying and somehow he'll find a way to make it about how hard it is for him to deal with your emotions. That's not empathy, that's emotional hijacking. It's when your pain gets used against you, and instead of receiving comfort, you end up apologizing for needing it. You start to anticipate his needs before he even speaks. You change your behavior just to avoid his coldness. And when he gives you the silent treatment, you crumble inside. Because deep down you're terrified of being completely abandoned. That fear? That's not love talking. That's trauma bonding. A deep psychological attachment that forms through cycles of reward and punishment. It keeps you loyal to someone who keeps wounding you. There are moments, brief ones, where you see through it, where the fog lifts and you realize, this isn't healthy, this isn't love. But almost immediately, doubt creeps back in. What if I'm too sensitive? What if I'm misreading everything? That internal war? It's one of the most damaging parts of being with a covert narcissist. They don't just manipulate the relationship, they manipulate your perception of reality. You might even find yourself defending him, telling others, he's just going through something, or he's not that bad. But deep down, a part of you knows. A part of you is tired of making excuses, tired of waiting for things to get better, tired of pretending you're okay when you're breaking inside. And that's where the change begins, not in him, but in that part of you that's finally had enough. Because healing doesn't start when they stop hurting you. It starts when you stop justifying the pain, when you say, this is not what I deserve, this is not love, this is not home. And if you feel that fire inside you, burning quietly but steadily, that's your strength. It never left. It was just waiting for you to remember. You're not here to survive someone else's silence. You're here to reclaim your voice. You begin to forget what it feels like to be yourself. Not the version of you that's careful, filtered, constantly watching his reactions, but the raw, unfiltered you. The one that used to feel, express, laugh freely, cry without shame. That version got pushed aside, little by little. Not because you changed, but because he made you feel like who you are was too much, too emotional, too inconvenient. And over time, you started to believe it. Every disagreement turns into a twisted version of reality where somehow you're always at fault. Even when your intentions were pure, even when you were just trying to communicate. He finds the one sentence you said wrong and builds an entire argument around it while ignoring everything else. That's why selective focus. A subtle but powerful manipulation tactic. He'll hold you accountable for things he'd never allow you to bring up in him. And that creates a deep imbalance, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You pour into the relationship with every ounce of your energy and get fragments in return. But those fragments are addictive, because every now and then, he shows just enough warmth, just enough softness, to keep your hope alive. That's the pattern. That's how the bond forms, not through love, but through emotional starvation mixed with rare validation. It's a dangerous combination. You start to become numb, not just to him, but to everything. Your body's way of protecting itself kicks in. You stop crying because it feels pointless. You stop sharing because it always backfires. You stop hoping because the disappointment is worse. That emotional shutdown isn't weakness, it's survival. It's your nervous system trying to hold you together in an environment that constantly tears you apart. But numbness isn't peace, It's just postponed pain. And when you do speak up, when you finally say, "This hurts," he responds with confusion or annoyance. "What did I do?" "You're too sensitive." "That's not what I meant." He turns your pain into a problem with your perception. That's gaslighting at its core. You're no longer allowed to feel what you feel without having to defend it, explain it, tone it down, and slowly, you begin to question if your feelings are even valid at all. He has this way of showing affection right when you're about to give up. When you start to pull away, he senses it and suddenly becomes present. He listens. He's kind. He remembers things you said weeks ago. For a moment, you think, maybe I was wrong. Maybe he does care. But that moment fades. Because once he feels safe again, he slips back into silence. That's not love. That's control through timing. And it's strategic. You may find yourself constantly researching, watching videos, reading articles, trying to understand what's happening to you, trying to make sense of this emotional chaos. That search for clarity? That's your intuition fighting back. It's the part of you that hasn't fully given up, the part of you that still knows this isn't normal, that still wants to heal. And that's powerful. That means you haven't lost yourself completely. Not yet. There's guilt too. The kind of guilt that eats you from the inside out. Guilt for being angry. Guilt for needing space. Guilt for even thinking about walking away. Because he's made himself look so innocent, so calm, so misunderstood. And you feel like the problem. That guilt, that's manufactured empathy. He wants you to feel sorry for him even while you're the one bleeding emotionally. And it works. Until it doesn't. Because eventually, something inside you cracks. Something shifts. It's not always a loud moment. Sometimes it's quiet. A moment where you hear yourself say, "I can't do this anymore," and this time you mean it. That's the beginning of the end. That's your soul taking its first breath after holding it in for far too long. And once that breath happens, no amount of fake calm, sweet words, or silent treatments can undo it. You start to see it clearly. The pattern, the manipulation, the way you've been bending to fit into a mold that was never made for you. You look back and realize how many times you justified, minimized, excused, and now you're tired. Not just physically, but emotionally tired. Tired of explaining, tired of hoping, tired of feeling like you're never enough for someone who's never truly present. But with that exhaustion comes clarity. And with clarity comes choice. You start asking different questions. Not, "How can I fix this?" but, "Do I even want this?" Not, "What if he changes?" but, "What if I change?" That shift is powerful. That shift is healing. Because for the first time in a long time, you're putting the focus back on you. On what you need. On what you deserve. On who you are when no one is manipulating your mind. And maybe the most painful part? Realizing that the love you were fighting so hard to protect was never really there. That you fell in love with potential. With the version of him that showed up in the beginning. But love isn't potential. Love is consistent. Love doesn't confuse you. It doesn't punish you with silence. It doesn't make you question your worth. It holds you, it listens, it heals. And deep down you always knew that. Now you just have to remember it.